It's another video. Hi everyone, welcome back to my channel. You get the reference? It's giving Austin Powers today. This was the inspiration. Actually, I love my makeup. I really worked super hard on this makeup and I would like to show everyone. Today's video is about Fenty Savage. This is a video that was research intensive. It borders on investigative, but it's important to know that the information I found in order to make this video is right out there for everybody to find. I did not have to talk to sources or build a relationship with a whistleblower in order to find this information. So just know that most of what you want to know about the world, about celebrities, about the creatives, the corporations, and the brands that are dominating our world is out there for you to find. You just need to know where to look and you need to ask the right questions. So I hope you're gonna like this video. It's a good one. And I'm making this to remind everybody that $1 is a vote. As consumers, it's really important for us to know who and what we're putting our money into. And so it's our responsibility, I think, to do our research. And if you don't have time to do your research, that's what I'm here for. So let's get started. Rihanna performed at the Super Bowl last month. By the time I post this video, she'll have performed at the Oscars as well, unless there's a wardrobe malfunction or someone walks up on stage to slap someone else. The word on everybody's lips is still likely going to be, is that a baby? Again? Well, she's definitely never gonna drop an album now. What about us? The fans? What about me? After that, the word on everybody's lips is still likely going to be Fenty, aka Fenty. Allow me to demystify because I found this confusing. So you might find this confusing as well. Hopefully this helps. So Fenty is an ecosystem that consists of Fenty Fashion, Fenty Beauty, and Fenty Savage. These are three separate companies, three separate entities. Different funding, different shareholders, different businesses entirely. Makeup is not the same kind of business as intimates, which is not the same kind of business as luxury fashion, which is not the same kind of business as, let's say, vintage fashion. So Fenty Fashion launched in 2019. That was a flop. Understitch made a whole video about it. Go watch it. Fenty Beauty and Fenty Savage, though, have been smash hits. Why? Well, the bottom line is there are a couple reasons for this, but breaking it down, the right kind of products, backed by the right kind of people, with the right kind of distribution, marketed in the right way, and launched at the perfect time. So we can understand that Rihanna's promotion of Fenty Beauty and Fenty Savage at the Super Bowl was a kind of victory lap moment for two breakout brands that since their launches, respectively in 2017 and 2018, have been breaking the internet and have been on everybody's lips. Fenty Beauty is what made Rihanna a billionaire based on the $1.4 billion value of the 50% stake she owns in the company. Fenty Beauty makes more money than Kylie Cosmetics, KKW Beauty, and Jessica Alba's Honest Company. Fenty Savage, on the other hand, will likely double Rihanna's wealth based on the 30% stake she owns of that company if the $3 billion IPO the company is shooting for goes through. This video will focus specifically on Fenty Savage, but given who owns what, you may find it relevant to Fenty Beauty as well. This is a story about blood money, consumer fraud, and WTF Johnny Depp. So let's just start with a quick disclaimer. I am not a Rihanna stan, okay? But as an artist, I respect her. Her aesthetic, her artistry, and her story, all of these things have inspired me, okay? I'm not here to take anything away from her accomplishments. Okay? I make this video with the agenda of reminding people that Hollywood is not going to save us. Okay? When shit hits the fan with climate change, guess where Rihanna's headed? Onto the same rocket ship as Jeff Bezos, Elon Musk, and the rest of the Illuminati gang, okay? And watching the world burn on their way out. $1 is a vote. I said this at the top of my video. $1 is a vote. As consumers, it's important for us to know who and what we're putting our money into. I'm here to provide you with information. What you do with that information is your business. But allow me to provide you with my election platform. By liking and subscribing to my channel, you're making sure that one less creative needs to suck a celebrity, corporate, or big brand in order to make a living. This means that when shit is smelling funky dunky, I'm in a position to talk about it and speak out. And shit with Fenty Savage is smelling funky dunky. So let's talk about it. My beef jerky with Fenty Savage begins with the concept of disruption. Disruption is defined as, and I quote, a company or form of technology that causes radical change in an existing industry or market by means of innovation. End quote. But I prefer this explanation. Quote, a company is disruptive if it has found an innovative way of doing business in an existing sector, or is creating a new market and in the process is shaking up the status quo. Many organizations have been described as disruptive, but the label is only really justified when the company permanently disrupts the existing sector, forcing established businesses to change their approach. End quote. The words I want you to keep in mind here are radical change and shaking up the status quo. Within that context, what disruption means to me then is, let's say the world is allegedly run by a few old crusty white men who are only in positions of power and influence because they inherited it. Okay? Think of the Murdoch family. Then someone like Rihanna comes out of left field and takes a piece of the pie for her and her people. As a result, the hegemony of power within that industry, and therefore the world, is radically redesigned. That, to me, is disruption. And that is pretty badass. But what that is not is Fenty Savage. Even though that is the story the company would really like you to believe. Since Fenty Savage's launch in 2018, the narrative that's been building itself around the brand is that it's a disruptor that's quite literally changing the game. This is a narrative that has not only been pushed by Fenty Savage, it's also a narrative that has been amplified by media, blogs, and influencers on the brand's payroll. And if you know anything about Fenty Savage's social media campaigns, you know that it quite literally has every single influencer on its payroll. I have been skeptical about this narrative since the very beginning. When you work in and with media, you begin understanding the mechanics that drive things like hype and narrative building. If you have enough experience, you also start being able to draw parallels between the mechanics of hype and what it takes to generate that. I'm talking dollars and cents wise. I'm talking capital, time, manpower wise. And I am convinced that anybody in media will tell you that the amount of money, power, and connections it takes to generate the kind of buzz Fenty Savage did and does is quite simply not possible for most brands that are truly disrupting the world. Okay? So the question I started my research with is who and what is truly powering Fenty Savage. And it's that very question that led me down what would be a very disturbing rabbit hole. A rabbit hole that I'm about to share with you in this video. In life, if you want to find out if your partner is cheating on you, or if your local overhyped Instagram brand is nothing more than a money laundering front for the mafia, what you want to do is follow the money. In following the money for my research, the disturbing place I landed in likely wouldn't have been as disturbing had the company just branded itself accurately from the get-go. Not a disruptor. You'll see, everything in this video really just comes back to that. Fenty Savage was launched in 2018 as a partnership between Rihanna and a company called TechStyle Group. TechStyle Group is an LA-based incubator with many brands under it. Some of those brands include Kate Hudson's Fab Athletics, Shoe Dazzle, Just Fab, and Fenty Savage. TechStyle's whole shtick revolves around this online-based membership model where customers are charged monthly for credit towards their purchases. Yes, this is the same membership model that landed Fenty Savage in hot water for consumer fraud. We'll get to that. I wasn't able to find information on what stake TechStyle Group has in Fenty Savage. But what we do know is that Rihanna's stake in Fenty Savage is reportedly 30%. However, what we also know is that Fenty Savage has gone through 5 rounds of funding. They've raised a total of $310 million to date. So the distribution of who owns what and how much of it may have changed by now. Okay. Bottom line is, if you want to know where your consumer dollar is going, you got to look at the stakeholders. And it's when I started looking at the stakeholders that shit started smelling a little funky. When we look at Series A funding, we can see that Fenty Savage got money from Acme Capital, Jay-Z's Marcy Venture Growth, and Avenir Growth Capital. Nothing really to see here, okay? Other than the fact that Acme Capital seems to have a stake in like every major company. We're talking Uber, SpaceX, Airbnb, Robinhood. But the only real fashion player it seems to have on their roster is Poshmark. But vintage is a completely different beast. So by looking at Series A alone, you could still kind of buy into this disruption narrative. You could buy into this disruption narrative until you get to Series B. In February 2021, Fenty Savage secured $115 million in Series B funding. A company called L. Catterton was listed as being one of the investors. So I asked myself, who the f is L. Catterton? So L. Catterton was previously called Catterton Partners. In 2016, they rebranded to L. Catterton following a merger. A merger is when different companies join forces and become gang, okay? So everybody can make more money. Okay, this new gang or gang squad now consists of Catterton Partners, LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, and Financière Agasse, which is the family holding company of Bernard Arnault. So then I asked myself, who the f is Bernard Arnault? Well, Bernard Arnault is quite literally one of the world's richest men. But Bernard Arnault is also the founder, chairman, and CEO of LVMH, Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy, one of the companies involved in the merger. So who is LVMH? What is LVMH? Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy is a holding company. And it's a holding company that literally already owns all the luxury fashion brands. There's a YouTube video called Louis Vuitton Moet Hennessy owns everything in your closet. Not everything in my closet, because I can't afford most of that shit. But you get the idea, okay? We're talking Louis Vuitton, Loewe, Fendi, Celine, Dior, Givenchy, Kenzo, Marc Jacobs, Emilio Pucci. So the richest man in the world is getting even richer thanks to Fenty Savage. Congratulations. He owns the entire luxury fashion industry, and now he also has his fingers even deeper in intimates. And I say even deeper because the funniest thing is, I was able to find market insight information that dates back to 2018. And that market insight information already listed LVMH as one of the key dominant players in the lingerie market before it even had a stake in Fenty Savage. Disruption where? Buckle up, it gets worse. When I took a gander at Fenty Savage's Series C investors, I noticed this flashy name, the Abu Dhabi Growth Fund. I wondered, who could that possibly be? Listen, it could have been a privately held company run by some rich people in the Emirates that secretly support the supposedly progressive and inclusive agenda that Fenty Savage is pushing in the West. If you're going to support a cause you believe in an environment where you can't do that, what a badass way of going about it. But no, the Abu Dhabi Growth Fund is a global investment fund owned by the government of Abu Dhabi. The government of Abu Dhabi is a subnational authority that governs the Emirate of Abu Dhabi. The Emirate of Abu Dhabi is one of the 7 monarchies that make up the United Arab Emirates. The guy who runs this shit is a monarch called Sheikh Mohammed bin Zayed Al Nahyan. I hope I got the pronunciation right. Who is this man? Well, other than likely one of the men who will get some percentage of every dollar you spend on Fenty Savage, he is also the leader of an authoritarian regime. AKA, he's a fucking dictator. In this man's authoritarian regime, there are reportedly, allegedly, no free and fair elections. Political and civil rights are limited, free speech is restricted, and there is no free and independent media. If you watch my Beyonce short, where I explain why her performance in Dubai was so controversial, you'll also discover that the UAE has blood on its hands, okay? This is a regime that, in order to maintain its grip on power, according to Human Rights Watch, practices things like torture, arbitrary detention, and the forced disappearance, and some argue straight up murder of citizens, dissidents, and residents. Also, allow me to remind you that in the UAE, homosexuality is a crime punishable by death, and women still live under a male guardianship system. Fenty Savage, now taking investments from regimes that repress all the values our marketing cheers on. Print it out, slap it on a t-shirt, and trademark that shit, because it's literally the truth. But if you thought what I just mentioned to be pretty bad, wait until you hear what one of Rihanna's business partners used to sell: textile group and consumer fraud. As I mentioned earlier, Fenty Savage, at its inception, was primarily a partnership between Rihanna and the company TechStyle Group. Fenty Savage has since gone through 5 rounds of funding, so the distribution of who owns what is likely very different today, but definitely does include, somewhere down the line, a dictator. What you need to know is that the online subscription-based business model behind Fenty Savage was powered by TechStyle Group. This business model is their MO, so it only makes sense that this is in part what they brought to the table in the partnership. So even though this isn't Riri's end of the bargain, she's still in bed with these people. So she is still responsible to a certain extent to what happens to her company, right? If you're one to follow the gossip, like I am, an avid drinker of the tea, you've likely heard that Fenty Savage's subscription service was a scam-a-lam. Fab Socialism made a great video about this. Watch it. In fact, she's been doing God's work as it pertains to just content that digs a little deeper, especially relating to Rihanna. So definitely go check out her content. But up until just a couple months ago, this was all just rumor. The scam-a-lam, the alleged scam-a-lam, was a rumor. Well, according to the government of California, rumor it is no more. Here's a recap of what happened. In 2020, the consumer watchdog group called Truth in Advertising filed a formal complaint to the FTC against Fenty Savage and TechStyle. This kickstarted what would lead to a lawsuit filed against the company in August 2022. In August 2022, Santa Clara County and 4 other California local governments allege that Savage Fenty defrauded customers by automatically enrolling them in the brand's VIP plan and making it really hard to get out of it. They were also accused of falsely advertising the ability to use store credit and misled consumers over product pricing. In December 2022, Fenty Savage was fined $1.2 million in order to settle the lawsuit. They have to pay $1 million in civil penalties, along with $50,000 in investigative costs. They have to pay restitution. I love that word, okay? They have to pay restitution totaling $150,000 to California VIP customers who tried to cancel their memberships and did not get refunds. I understand this is in criminal court and there's no such thing as guilty, but it sounds kind of guilty to me. Okay, this is just my impression. This is my perception. This is the vibes. The looks sounds kind of sus. The funny thing is, this is not the first time Riri's business partners, TechStyle Group, have been in hot water for this very thing. In 2014, TechStyle Group reached a legally binding settlement of $1.8 million after being sued by the state of California for allegedly misleading customers about automatic monthly payments charged to their credit cards in connection with JustFab.com, FabKids.com, ShoeDazzle.com, and Fab Athletics. As part of their settlement, TechStyle Group agreed to refrain from, and I quote, making untrue or misleading statements about products or services, deceptively marketing product prices and discounts that are only available to consumers who are bound by the company's VIP membership without clearly and conspicuously disclosing this fact, and failing to provide a timely cancellation mechanism. According to Truth in Advertising, fast forward 5 years, and TechStyle Group was still on its bullshit, using the same tactics it did in 2014 with Fenty Savage in 2020. The real kicker, though, is that TechStyle Group was co-founded by this guy, Adam Goldenberg, effectively one of Riri's business partners in Fenty Savage. Adam Goldenberg once led a company called Sensa. In 2014, the same year as the other lawsuit, Sensa was fined nearly $50 million for deceptive advertising. And guess what kind of product Sensa was allegedly selling? A bogus miracle weight loss powder. So the same guy who's now pushing a product that sells you the idea that big is beautiful, just a few years ago was pushing a product that implied that my thick ass could lose 30 pounds without going to the gym and without dieting. You can't make this shit up. The same way you can't unsee Johnny Depp in Fenty Savage's latest fashion show. Let's talk about it. Allow me to conclude this deep dive with a few words about Johnny Depp. In November 2022, Fenty Savage aired the 4th volume of its much-hyped runway show. Johnny Depp made an appearance, and the internet near damn lost its mind. Okay? People, especially on the left, were flabbergasted by this move. Any way you slice it, Johnny Depp did not come out of his trials unscathed. Yes, Johnny Depp won his defamation suit against Amber Heard in the US, but allow me to remind you, he did not win his defamation suit in the UK. In fact, a UK judge ruled that the allegations made against Depp in an April 2018 article calling him a wife beater were, quote, substantially true. The judge ruled that Depp assaulted Heard on a dozen occasions and put her in fear of her life 3 times. Okay? All this to say, you don't need to be an expert in the matter to know that there's dirt that came out on Johnny Depp in this trial. Okay? And so you'd think that no brand would want to get close to that, would want to associate with that. Especially not a brand like Fenty Savage that preaches progressive values, feminism, tolerance, etc. You'd think that Rihanna wouldn't want her image and likeness associated with that. Well, that entirely depends on which side of the aisle Fenty Savage and Rihanna really fall on. We all know by now that the way a company is marketed is not always representative of the values/political views of the people who own and run it. There can be a dissonance there. The truth is, we don't know what Rihanna's political views really are. And we don't know what the political views of her shareholders are. And the interesting thing is, support for Johnny versus Amber really did end up weaponized to fall along very clear political lines. From what I understand, based on my research, the right was weaponized to be more Camp Johnny, and the left was more Camp Heard. And so the casting of Johnny Depp in the Fenty Savage show only really makes sense in one of 2 ways. If the real politics of the people in power at Fenty really does fall more on the right than it does on the left, despite their advertising, then it makes sense. It also makes sense if the company is also actively trying to pander to the right as a consumer base. And if that's the case, not only is Fenty Savage laughing all the way to the bank, but also clowning you, the inclusive consumer. Imagine the sheer audacity of a brand to be like, watch us pander to the left while also pandering to the right. The shamelessness of the Johnny Depp casting only really makes sense when we remind ourselves that Fenty Savage is owned by a group of people who are already extremely seasoned in the dark arts of dominating and running the world. These are really out here like, watch me have my cake and eat it too, in your face, and there's nothing you can do unless you want to be thrown in jail or blacklisted from working for any of my companies, which, if you're a creative, especially in the fashion industry, good luck making a living without having to come into contact with LVMH and the many companies it owns, okay? And that, my dear internet friends, while it is many things, disruption is not one of them. If anything, what I just mentioned is literally just business as usual. So the next time you buy Fenty Savage, be aware of what you're putting your money into. Fenty Savage is literally just another fast fashion company that is very, very far away from actually changing the world.